You're listening to Gone Mobile, your input and output for all things .NET MAUI and mobile.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another Gone Mobile. Alan, do you know what comes after summer?
Fall.
Yeah, and do you know what happens kind of late in fall or early after fall?
Well, usually a new .NET release, unless you guys are late.
Right.
You can be late?
No, not
Are you
this
sure?
not this time. I mean, we have precedents for Maui anyway.
Oh, okay. Well,
Do you remember that we didn't actually make it for .NET 6 GA, right?
that's true. I did forget that.
Yeah. It was a mad rush to get anything done, and we decided that we would ship in, mid-cycle in .NET 6, and there we were.
Building tooling on top of tooling that's still being built can be
it was
a nightmare.
I don't ever want to go back to that part of my life. It was a lot of work.
Okay.
And a lot of it was, stuff like at the time, Visual Studio for Mac didn't support Maui, not even Maui, didn't support like .NET, .NET 6 or .NET 5 while we were working on it. And so to actually build Maui itself, well, you didn't really have a tool on Mac to do the iOS or Mac Catalyst parts of it, right?
Cool.
It was
good times.
Yeah, it's like console write lines for debugging complex layouts that go, back and forth between the native land and the managed side, and crossing that bridge back and forth and figuring out how, a native layout changing propagates back over, and how the opposite works too. It was not.
I'm not allowed to make fun of the Microsoft product managers, am I?
Well, I don't
well,
know.
you don't. You're not allowed to, but I am. I won't do it, but I'm thinking it. How's that?
I mean, hindsight is 2020. Maybe we should have just waited till Net 7, but we had already gone through, all the COVID stuff, and that had delayed things and delays. So there was some desire to get things out the door.
Drive hard, push
but
harder.
At least, we can look back unfondly on those times, and now we're not there anymore. And things are looking pretty good, I think. .NET 8, we kept, pushing stuff out into servicing, and .NET 9. So like the interesting thing is, for a Maui perspective, there's not a ton new happening in .NET 9 because we're just pushing everything out to .NET 8 as much as we can. Have you tried the .NET 9 previews at all?
No, I've gotten less needy for that stuff. Like, it's not like the old days, right? Like, remember when we used, I don't know if you can go back to the NetFX days.
Oh yeah.
When we, Net 2 was like,
big changes.
And Net 4.5 was like, right?
Wasn't Net 2, was it Net 2 that generics landed?
Yeah. That was a big damn deal. Big. And everything got faster, and we got like, you used to get excited for like the new Visual Studios, because like they were big updates. Big changes. And you're like, give me some toys.
There's some changes here and there. Have you used any of the public previews of Visual Studio at this point?
Well, could I lie and say yes, but I haven't? Because I got to admit, I'm just all in VS Code and Rider these days.
I always forget which version of Visual Studio I see what things in it, because like I've got 3 at any given time, at least, on my machine. I've got stable, right?
Yep.
I've got public preview, and then I've got basically like our main branch nightly, build, or not even nightly, just like we call it like the internal preview, right? Which is basically main branch. And then if a release is coming out, I don't do this as much anymore because things have kind of settled down a little bit. And we have like teams of people testing, the new VS is coming. Does Maui work still? So it's not like, or early days where we might have like a few of us installed the branch build of VS on our own machines and been like, I can build a Maui app, I guess we're good. Right? Like we've come a little ways.
Now let me ask you, because I don't see this anymore, but what happened to the pretty UI refresh that we were supposed to be getting? Because it was nice. It was good on my old eyes.
That's what I don't remember again what I see on main versus what I see in public preview. I know main
like,
always has
poof,
some UI stuff going on that's
gone.
different. But
John's looking at the internal right now, going,
I
"Where
am.
is it?"
You can see it probably in the
Yeah,
reflection of my
I can see
glasses. I don't see anything too interesting that's different.
I just realized I didn't put on my cool lights too, and I've got cool new.
Oh man.
Yeah, you don't have your stuff on either.
I got
We're
my ring light on.
We're on the YouTube, man. What's
I have
going on?
the front facing light. And I'm moving offices sometime. I know I've been saying that
Yeah,
for
yeah, you've
like
been saying
months
that
now.
forever. That's not happening.
It will eventually. It's just a matter of time. And then I've got plans. I got big ideas. So with all that, yeah, I mean, like like you've said, it's not as fast moving anymore. And I thought it was kind of interesting to look at the C# language features that are coming up. So .NET 9, there's not a lot, new that's happening. And like I don't say that in a bad way necessarily. Like, yes, I always like new fun things, but at the same time, to not have to start thinking like, how am I going to train myself to use this new language pattern? That's pretty cool, and I want to use it, but um, you know, it's hard to retrain that muscle memory sometimes to use the new stuff. I don't know if you find that.
Yeah, yeah. It's lesser these days. You're right. I don't know what's the one that screws me. At least we're out of the days where we were sharing net standard and going into modern. That's where I was getting screwed up. But nowadays, it's like net 6 to net 8 isn't a huge difference in syntax or APIs.
No, I mean there's a couple C# versions. There is some newer. I started using like the I don't know what that feature's actually called, but when you use like the square brackets to like do your collection
expressions or whatever.
Yeah, that's nice. I'm liking that.
Yep.
In C#13, like I was scanning through to see what of the things that changed that I thought were kind of most interesting. And there's really like two things that I'm kind of happy about. One more than the other. There's the collections or like your params, know how you can do that. You can now use like different collection types
instead of just the array.
Yeah,
that's handy.
Which is that's nice.
Often you'd end up being like, okay, well, I've got a params. I still use that. It's funny. A lot of people don't use params.
I
it's
like
they don't know about it, but there's times where you're like, okay, well, I already have a params. I don't want to make an overload for a list.
Right.
Or go to array, because then you're just reallocating it.
Well,
now
and
you're just like,
that's the worst one. It's like, I'm going to have to either to array or do another, overload.
It's still minor, but like, dude, just consume this thing.
And it's a group. It's a bunch of things. Like it's take it.
And an array at the end of the day is still an enumerable. Like, it will cast to an enumerable. So just like eat the thing, man.
Here it is. I don't want to have to tell you more specifically about it.
Yeah. So that
one was good.
And I think that one was a pretty easy one to get, right? Like that is just
it
was almost like an oversight or something.
I ran into that one a lot recently working on my app, where I've got like, I have my I know you love my abstraction over formatted string. I think it's called formatted string. I don't think you ever used that.
You did something wild there.
So like labels in Maui have the concept of a formatted string that you can, that is a formatted string is a collection of basically spans, I guess. I don't know I don't remember what the actual name in our framework is called, because I always use them through my abstraction.
Yep.
And so I made a formatted text type and a formatted or a text span type, right? Those go in my formatted the spans go in my formatted text. Yeah. See, I named them poorly because I'm confusing them myself.
Yeah, you're like, what am I talking about right now?
Yeah.
Something so I put a string in and somehow it comes out nice and
well, and I have magic. Like, the color and font weight and like all in the font family, and I did I did the colors as like a key so that it's like lookupable in the styles of my app, whether it's the web app or the Maui app. So I have this whole abstraction, and so I deal with a whole bunch of like these text spans, and I have different places that I like want to compose the strings differently. It's a pretty fundamental part of my app. So I've been running into this one a lot. So I'm excited to not have to think like, oh, do I make another overload or do I just to array it and call it a day and don't care?
So here we are. You've got this funky little thing, and
yeah,
it's doing what you need to.
I should release it as a library.
Well, you will. You might, or you might just put it in a repo. Let people take it. Sometimes less noise, other than the ones that can you put this as a NuGet? If I wanted to put it as a NuGet, it'd already be a NuGet. You put it as a NuGet. Yeah. Somebody actually did that though when you did that for FF image loading the port.
I'm sure because I never.
Out and then
I think I had it building as one, but I never pushed it out to NuGet as one.
Yeah, you did a lot of work on that too. It's a shame.
Yeah,
whatever.
I don't want to have to maintain it. So the other type, which is kind of like
this, I like actually.
Oh yeah, and maybe you know more context about it than I do. Like I know there's something implicitly different in how it works. So like the thing you always used to do is create just a random object, right? Usually like I don't know, I'd always create like a static read-only object and you would lock around that object and I'd create that instance of that object so it wasn't confused with anything else. It's like its sole purpose is to act as the lock. And so now there's a system threading lock type. So what do you know about this one?
So this is interesting because it's like the thing when you do locks is sometimes you might want to lock multiple things, right? Almost like a transaction.
Mm-hmm.
So you need, and I still think it's a good practice. I don't know if I'll use this thing, but it opens options, I guess, is the best way to look at it. Because now I can pass the lock around and say, just stay within scope, right?
Right.
I think that's what you can do.
Yeah, there was some other aspect of it too that I didn't really fully have time to look into.
But at least this way it kind of opens that gateway as opposed to trying to stay in scope. Like I can pass it down the pipe.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think of a good case because I have had this case where I'm like, I think now what I do right now, it's funny, we were just talking about this today with some lock, with the preferences. We were talking about preferences today with Android.
Yeah.
And I was like, you got to lock that thing because it doesn't like multi-threaded access, We'd been through that. But what I ended up doing was tossing an action, then doing the lock and getting the stuff, running the action with here's the current version of preferences, do whatever you're going to do on it, commit, remove lock. And I think that's how I've been doing it, but it's you can see like I had to funnel it through to one area to get all of that in one spot. Whereas I think this kind of opens it up so you can go a little bit wider.
And you could always do like use like semaphore slim or something like that as a.
If I'm doing async, I would definitely do that as well. A little bit of a, I don't want to say tougher problem, but certainly it's a good, same idea. Yeah, same idea.
So
and you could always do this. They had that that marshalling lock you could use as well. I never did use that personally, and I think it's gonna this is like a nice wrapper around that. Like you try to enter, and it'll say false or.
I've used that in the past, and this probably doesn't also solve like multiple concurrent reader, single writer type scenarios and stuff like that too, right?
Well, and if you think back to like manual reset event, wasn't that thing too? We used to use a lot of that. I honestly found those. It's almost like we had outgrown those. Like we're big on the scoping of things now, right?
Yeah. I mean, so unless you're building like some really like customized, collection or something like that, I think you don't really get into that anymore.
Yeah, and like I said, if you can pass an action and create like a centralized lock and say, here, this is the thing, it's now safe to work with.
Yeah.
That's what I've been doing for years, and I'm not sure if this will help alleviate that or who knows. I guess we wait and see.
I kind of just like that I don't know, it's my really what's the crotchety self that I don't like using an object. I'm just like I want a thing that is more descriptive of why I'm using it. Like I know it's fine. It's there's no reason other than I'm just like I don't like it. It looks dumb.
I want to know what this thing is doing.
Well, I always name them like lock something, right? But
I called it I usually call mine a sync object or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Anyway, so that I don't know. Did you see any other C# 13 things that were notable? There was kind of
one that they dumped that I was getting excited for was the kind of like external. What the heck I forget what the exact name of it was.
I don't remember either. I remember and I don't even remember what it was at this point, other than it was like there was a thing that I was sad because I knew I wanted it.
It was like extensions on
Oh yeah,
extension
property
properties.
extensions. Yeah,
and that was interesting. I think my guess is they had to pull that because think about
That's
the
a
havoc
hard
you
one.
could wreak with that.
Yeah.
Oh,
Extension methods already. That's one thing that I kind of wish that we didn't do in the Maui repo so much to start. We have extension methods everywhere with the idea being like, hey, if you're writing your own handler, you might also be wanting to set the text on, the entry field that you are using in your custom handler. So why don't we use an extension method for when we do it so that you can use the same one and the logic works the same? And it's like, in theory, sure. In practice, no. Nobody's gonna know what it does. So you're gonna be like, I'm not gonna use it, right? Like I
Yep.
need to know what it's doing so that my own code works. And that's even if you could find it. And even in our own repo, there's a lot, there's enough cases where it's like somebody didn't know this other thing existed, so they made their own. Now we have two. So
That isn't well. That's always the cause, right? That happens all the time.
yeah,
And I mean, like this external properties thing and extension properties thing was really interesting. But like I said, you think about the havoc. If you think extension methods are crazy, and they can be, and you're right, you get multiples created because you lose scope on or visibility on what's attached to that thing now.
Yep.
I mean, it's no different than calling into a static, but what it does is becomes it IntelliSenses right off the bloody object. So, I mean, I did that with Shiny. It was a big oops where I had like extension methods for reflection.
Yeah.
And I put it on object and it was like in the root. And I was like, oh yeah.
Well, I think it also
thing to do.
It also kind of encourages, like, I don't know, especially if you're doing anything that's like you care about the shape of the API and you're like, oh, well, I can keep my, my class clean here and I can just do this as an extension method and it's not going to look like somebody doesn't have to go some random util class of extension methods dot do a thing. It just, like you said, it just comes off the object with IntelliSense. So I know I've often been kind of eager to use it because I'm like, oh, I can make the API still decent, but like separate the actual logic somewhere else in my code.
Right. Or it's, in cases it's easy to build onto stuff. Like I said, I did one for object because I had to do reflection. Whether people like reflection or not, it's used.
Sometimes you need to use it.
Right. So I would often say, if this thing is in there, get the type, cast it, otherwise return null. Right. So I put these extension methods off of object because I would use them frequently.
Yep.
And of course, I make everything public. I never do a public sealed logic or internal sealed. Maui could stop doing that too.
It'd
be awesome. But at the same time, I ended up exposing everything. The people are like, hey, what's all these methods? I'm like, who cares? Just ignore them.
Yeah, just
I ended up removing them in scope because people complained enough. But like, still, they are helpful. You don't have to use them.
They have their place.
But fine, your IntelliSense. It's like going back to the old days. If you ever did any Java development in the initial, what the hell was the editor we used to use? Oh, I'm getting so old. I can't remember.
NetBeans or
no, it was even before that, man.
Like Swing? The first. What Swing was the UI language?
We're going back to like 2000.
Eclipse.
There we go. Good memory. Yeah. When you used to press dot to get IntelliSense and you get like everything, it was like, I don't even know, but I don't care about your imports. Here's everything.
Mm-hmm.
And you'd be like, oh, wow, that took like 5 seconds to render. IntelliSense is fantastic here. So we're like doing the same thing with all these extension methods and extension properties. And yeah, I imagine they thought about all the things that we would do wrong and said, yeah, I think we're going to wait on this one. So that was probably good, but disappointing.
A little bit more. Yeah. And, it's funny too, because I saw some feedback that was like, can't believe that you're doing this, like you put it in the preview and now you're taking it away. And it's like, I forget who answered it from Microsoft, but the answer was good too. And it was like, yeah, I get it, but we're putting these things out there earlier so that we're trying to be more open and transparent about what we're trying out, what we're thinking of doing. And sometimes you figure out that the answer is not good, but like, would you rather have, loved and lost than to never have loved at all?
That was awful.
Right.
It was awful.
But that's kind of it, right?
Yeah, well, and I mean, I don't think they've outright abandoned it. I think they've pushed it out.
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, I don't think anything's ever truly abandoned. And so.
Well, until it's released. And once it's released, then you're kind of, especially in the language. I'd still love to see event delegates and stuff die. And just, well, come on.
No, I'm with you.
Observables.
I'd love to revisit, that a little bit and see if they could do something language wise to kind of shift from events to something else, even if it is
interfaces like Java.
Yeah, I know. I hear you.
They don't worry about memory leaks because of that, right? It's a different. You don't have the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Here's an interface. Do things with it. Yeah, sure. You have to implement a little bit more, but maybe they could change the C# language.
That's what I mean.
They've got
right?
default methods now, right?
Yeah.
So there's so many things they could do there.
You could do something to help that pattern out. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So that's the language. And see, you were worried that we wouldn't have enough to talk about what's coming in .NET 9, but we're already like 20 minutes in, and we've only
don't shut up.
touched the two features in the language that I thought were interesting and thought would only take us 5 minutes. So.
I like those features. Okay, but tell us about this next one, because this one I'm interested in.
Yeah, do you know what it is?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I know. I know the premise of it.
Let me. So the thing is, the password is workload version sets. See, I'm gonna have to remember the naming, and the naming here was hard too. Like, there's no good name.
What do we think of workloads?
Yeah, I'm gonna pass on that one. I mean, there was a lot of good intentionality around them, and there's maybe some parts of them that are reasonably okay, and there's a lot of parts of them that didn't go super well. And there's a lot of work that's gone into trying to figure out how to move forward from that, right?
I think the one thing that you kind of helped us fix here, remember I was having that non-repeatable build.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I went after David and I was like, you guys have to fix this now.
Yeah.
Right? Because builds were, like, if I run a build in DevOps, and this is never the case, I know, I get it. DevOps updates, stuff still changes. It doesn't matter. But when you did a workload install, you didn't necessarily get the version of the SDK you installed. You might still be getting micro updates. And there was one, and you guys didn't do it, thankfully. Couldn't come after you with a spear, could I? It was another team that screwed up the workloads.
I mean,
and the builds were broken
for everybody. Could have come after us for that for other releases too. And I think what kind of exasperated that the problems with it is, one, we're moving fast still, especially in .NET 7 and through .NET 8. Less stuff breaking in .NET 8, and that's very very intentional. But having things change rapidly and having risk of breaking things at the expense of trying to change things rapidly meant that you might get another version. And in a perfect world, like, maybe that'd be fine. You might not want it, but maybe it wouldn't surface anything.
You have to know about it. And I think that was the problem, is that people, even my understanding was the SDK was locked to a specific set of versions.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't. And that was the kicker.
The whole concept of workloads was kind of designed so that it wasn't tied to the SDK version, or it could at least float, above the SDK version if necessary. And part of that was because we knew we wanted to be able to release out of band from the SDK itself. Again, like, hindsight with everything, right? It turns out probably we don't actually build and release that much more often than the SDK does. However, I still wouldn't want to be tied into building, as part of the SDK and releasing with it. So we are still more loosely coupled, and that's very intentional. The other problem with workloads, from how you experience this, is that they're kind of designed to compose and not really care about the versions of things in a sense. It's not entirely true. But the idea is that, they don't like, it doesn't matter what SDK version is, as long as the pieces like fit together, like they're within the same SDK band versions and stuff. So back when you hit the things you're talking about, the fix was basically, or the answer to that was basically, workloads had this concept of, and they still do, of a rollback file, right? And that rollback file is really just a bit of JSON that says, here's
the
versions of each workload that I want to be used together when I issue workload install commands or workload update commands.
Right. And that ended up being the fix. That gave the repeatable build,
right,
which was an absolute must. Which
is fine, but it's still not super intuitive for one, right? Because like, how do you know what versions of those things you should have? Like, there's kind of a hidden command you can run in the CLI to dump out one of those files, sort of. So you could use that when like your whatever machine you have, you want to imitate that state of. So you do that. But then we would also try and ship like, okay, there's a rollback file in like this storage container that you can get by following a URL convention. And so like, if it's 8.0, if it's 8.0.7, there's a particular URL you could use to get that rollback file for that version of Maui. And because Maui's kind of like sits on top of everything, right? We're kind of the top of the pyramid in a sense. Like, we are opinionated sometimes about what version of the runtime, what version of Mac iOS, what version of Android that we want to sit on top of. Sometimes it matters. And so our rollback file would kind of be like the single source of truth of like, yep, for this version of Maui, here's like the set of versions for the configuration that we recommend. So that's kind of hard to figure out. So what we ended up arriving at is a thing called workload version sets. And I'd be lying if I think this is the perfect answer to everything workloads, but I think it's going to make things a heck of a lot better.
Is it just a rollback funky name for a rollback file?
It basically is.
All right.
So it's going to be it'll be a NuGet package that has its own version that has the rollback contained within it. And so the idea is that, like, one, if you know how to look at for NuGet packages, and I think they're also looking at trying to do some like IntelliSense and like VS Code and stuff for this, because for one, you can specify this this workload version set version within your global JSON, just like you can specify the SDK version, right? So you can go in your global JSON and say, I want this set of workload versions, or this version of workload sets, and then it'll pin to that.
I had a thought. I don't know if this is Net 9. And the reason I'm bringing it up is because it's directly related, is the new solution file format.
Mm-hmm.
That could go there.
Yeah.
No. Is that not Net 9 anymore?
No, I mean, I don't think there's a stated date for it to actually come out. Yeah,
it's a Visual Studio thing.
This is part of the problem, right? That's more of like a tooling project. Yeah,
usually a good one.
Line, yeah. Oh, I can hardly wait. I'm excited for that one too. But because like the SDK uses global JSON already, like it does make sense to be there, because it's you're listing out like, I want to use SDK 8.0, don't roll forward to minor versions or whatever, and I want to use this version of workload sets. And then the other kind of big change here is that when you used rollback files before, that was like a global thing. Like, that was for your whatever the context you ran those workload commands in, it would pick up, okay, this is the version of .NET,
installed,
right? Yeah. And that's what I'm installing it to. And so if you had one project that you wanted to use this version and another one that used the other version, sorry, like, didn't really work.
Yeah, it kind of went, or you didn't have to install and install.
Yeah, you could do that, but on Windows that could run into problems, because on Windows they use MSI based installs, and it doesn't like going back to older versions if you have a newer one installed, because that's how MSIs work.
So I get cranky with tooling.
Yeah, so now the kind of big change, it almost like the rollback file into a workload set is a convenience. It's not that earth-shattering of an idea. The bigger change is that like those packs for those workload sets will be all installed side by side. So you could go into 2 different projects or 2 different folders. One folder has a global JSON that says this version, and the other one has one that says this version. And when you go to like, .NET workload restore or whatever I'm not even sure offhand what the mechanism is. When you go to do that, it'll install things up for that one project, and then if you go switch to the other one and do it again, it'll install those as well, and it'll keep both of them. It'll keep the composition of both of those, so that it knows
there we go
which ones to reference based on what version you've specified. So that's kind of the bigger deal, is that you don't have to go figure out like what's the global version that I need to make everything happy.
DLL hell to NuGet hell to workload hell.
Yeah. I mean,
that's what I'm hearing.
It'll be another folder to watch grow and eventually say, why is this thing taking up 50 gigabytes on my system?
You got to clean that periodically.
Yeah. There's stuff to trim and clean up old stuff too and collect, but I don't know how, in practice, we'll see.
All right. Give me some Maui toys. What Maui stuff is coming? Tell me.
So yeah, like I said, like most of our stuff is bug fixes, right? We're trying to make Maui better. However, there are a few notable additions. I think the biggest one from like a new thing perspective and not just like a change perspective is title bar customization. So you don't do desktop stuff really, right? So
no.
But this does,
I think web, this iOS works, and Android. That's all.
I think it works on Android and iOS as well. I could be wrong.
Is it a shell thing or is it a everything?
No. So do you remember when you moved from forms to Maui and now we have a concept of a window?
Yeah.
Yeah. Which we always should have had in forms. And now one of the things that we intentionally did incorrectly with earlier versions of Maui was to say, well, there's all these projects coming over. They all set main page in their app to a page. Well, in a new world where technically your app can support multi-windows, like all the platforms, but more likely you're probably going to do it on desktop platforms or maybe iPad.
Or the foldable phones that are coming.
Yeah, right. The one that you'll never get because it's not coming.
Don't
we had to introduce the concept of a window in order to support the ability to have your app have multiple windows. Just like, you could have 2 windows and each one of them has a sort of main page, quote unquote. So window has been there forever. But what we have now introduced in Net 9 is the ability to customize your title bar for a given window. So there's a couple things that you have to do. One, if you're using main page, like if your app, all it does is set main page, you're gonna want to move away from that if you want to do anything with the custom window title bar. You technically can still customize it without moving away, but we're encouraging people to move away from it regardless because it was always kind of a hack just to help make transitioning easier. And that it's really not hard. I don't know if you've ever done it in your application class, like your Maui application class. You just override create window and return a new window when you're asked for it. And that can either be just like a new instance of the window that ships in Maui itself or your own subclass of that window, right?
So what can I do with this title bar? What can I put on? Can I do like a left icon, a right icon?
You can do all of it. It's can like, have you ever been to Zombo.com?
No, what the heck is
Zombo.com?
No.
You've never.
What am I missing out on that you haven't been telling me about again? What is Zombo.com?
Just type Zombo, ZOMBO.
Bandwidth limit exceeded, contact your service provider.
No, you can't do anything anymore at Zombo.com.
Yeah, I think Zombo.com is dead. So no, I haven't tried Zombo.com.
I mean, I'm surprised because you're about the right age. There's also, if you can't get to that one, there's HTML5 Zombo.com because Zombo was that one doesn't work now either. The original Zombo was like, I think a Flash based thing.
Oh my. Right.
Anyway, it's this stupid like meme, now meme website before there were memes where it's just like this weird dude being like, welcome to Zombo.com. You can do anything at Zombo.com.
I do remember that now.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's
that's what you're saying. You can do anything with a title bar.
So yeah. So title bar sits on the window. It's that top title bar area. And if you choose to customize what's in it, so the easiest way, the way I like to do it from my limited testing so far, is to create my own window, and I'll do it in XAML because I like it. And then, I use that as my main window in my application, which then I create in the create window override in my app. And in my window, I pass in whatever the thing I used to assign a main page was. Like, it's a pretty easy switch. And then in that window, you can go window, and then you can do the title bar. And then in the title bar, there's a title bar control that we have now, which has by default, and I'll get into why in a minute, there's like the leading content, trailing content, and the main content.
Okay.
You can use none or any of those different content areas. And as you might expect, like the main content's like the middle, then, trailing and leading. And there's reasons for having done that. The main reason is so that we can still, so like Windows makes the title bar stuff a little bit tricky. They introduced an API for it. But like what a lot of people want to do is say like, I just want to put my stuff in the title bar, right?
Yep.
Let me deal with what it looks like.
Yeah.
Well, on Mac Catalyst, that's super easy to do. There's like one thing you have to set, and then it's like all your content just goes up to the title bar. And somehow Mac figures out where to keep areas clickable and everything for you. So you can still like, because now that you've extended content here, you don't have a thing to click and drag anymore, right?
Okay.
You still have your like buttons, like your maximize, minimize, close. And those just kind of sit over top of your content, but you don't have like a thing to drag. But Mac OS does that for you, and it just works, and it's beautiful, and I love it. But on Windows, and I'd imagine this is just to how Windows is architected, like at the very core shell level. And so they had to make an API that basically was like, why don't you tell us what regions, you want to make clickable? And you can have whatever regions you want. I think it's just rectangles. Like, I don't think you can do like a circle, but you could say like, okay, here's like this rectangle, make that a target that I can click and hold and drag and do whatever. And if you don't do that, then just nothing is clickable, right? And so we've kind of taken, hopefully, the hard work away from that for you by having these kind of content areas. And then we have like places that we specify that are, clickable and stuff. And so you can put whatever Maui views you want into the title bar. You can, if you put it in the leading content area, it's going to be off to the left by, if you're default left to right. And then main in the middle, and then right, or leading, trailing on the right.
Would I be right in assuming this? People are asking for this because of like VS Code really likes to push the title bar agenda.
Yeah. Well, have you ever used or looked at? You don't have to have used it. The Photos app in Windows.
No.
If you ever open that up, or like Teams actually is an okay example on Windows too. Like they put like the search bar up in the the middle, right? Yeah. So, and like your username menu and stuff there. So that's like, those are some of the scenarios that we kind of looked at for how to model this after, because that's what people want to do. So that's coming, and there you actually on Windows can also say like, no, let me let me control the whole thing. But once you get into that area where you're like, I don't want to deal with like leading, trailing content and stuff, you have to tell us what controls you want to be clickable for, like still keeping some support of click and drag the window around, because we don't know. Right.
Fair enough. Sounds cool. I haven't tried it yet, but I will try it.
So, and I think the other thing, again, I don't remember offhand. I haven't tested. I think we either added or are planning to still add support so it works on Android and iOS, which is kind of neat too, because then you can kind of customize that whole top like nav bar kind of area, I believe is the intent.
Okay.
So that's one. That's the bigger one.
You don't. I know what people are going to be happy about here, but I'm looking at the second feature you have listed.
I gotta find my notes again because I lost it to Zombocom.
The next. So probably the disconnect handler is my guess. People will be like, "Ooh, joy," and that one's kind of to me, that's like a minor one, but
Yeah, but it's a bigger one in terms of potential ramifications, especially if you like create libraries and stuff. So the one there is we've been working really hard at trying to figure out memory leak stuff. We decided that there's like that whole one project that's like the memory toolkit or whatever, right? Where they just try and like blast through everything and like call disconnect down the tree and dispose, and super opinionated about trying to like collect stuff and clean stuff up.
Okay.
But like
I
the
have seen it, yeah.
conversation has always kind of been, well, okay, how do we know that you're done with something? How do we know for sure? Like, we could assume that you navigate away from a page and you're done with the page. What
If
if
it's
you?
not on the nav stack, it's done.
But what if? Yeah, yes. But I could have the handle on that page. I could hold a reference to that page and decide I want to push it again.
But
There,
that sounds like a page as a singleton type thing, which I've been like,
well,
don't
it's
do
not
it.
a singleton. There are some decent use cases for it. Like video player is one that kind of comes to mind. It's not just a page level thing, like it's a control level thing, right? So if I have a video and I want to shift it between you know, being on a page and then maybe some native like picture in picture thing with iOS,
Okay.
I don't want you to clean that up on me when I'm trying to do that, right?
But would that not be a window in a sense? Should I not be moving that video to a window, or should
Sure, but like
should it be in a
it's
window
kind of
already?
the bigger question of like, when do we know that you're done with that handler to clean it up for you?
When the window disappears? When the page
No, because we don't
disappears?
track the window. You're putting it in some native thing now. I don't know what you're doing with that.
Hmm.
So there are scenarios. So, but what we've arrived at basically is, okay, like we just said, typically most people care about stuff like when the page goes away, when you pop the page from the nav stack. So we're introducing like an attached property in the XAML level that you can define or override the kind of default behavior, so that you still can do stuff like take that video canvas. But the default will be like, yeah, we're gonna automatically call disconnect handler for you when we think you want it called. If you figure out that that's not what you want to happen, you can just set disconnect policy to manual or whatever the enum value we have is.
Sorry, what'd you call it?
I know. I was waiting to see if you'd catch that. Sorry, the enumerators.
That's going to be an ongoing joke on the show. So if you don't like it, you're probably going to get used to it, because we actually burned ourselves in the middle of an episode saying it's not an enum, it's an enum. And then all of a sudden we were like, what about it? We don't call it an enumerator, but we do call it an enumerable.
Yeah, not an enumerable.
Yeah, what? Yeah. Anyhow.
So that's going to be one that hopefully helps people who are chomping at the bit to have something like that happen. But there's going to be fallout from that, and which is another reason to have like the override of saying like, don't do this, because like even on like a page level, I'm be like, don't disconnect stuff on my page, because something, maybe I use some weird plugin that doesn't properly do things in disconnect handler, and now everything's broken because it throws because they did something that never was called before. So
okay, the next thing we're about to talk about is the one that I'm interested in.
The embedding.
The embedding.
Okay. Have you done any of that yet so far?
Embedding depends on where this topic is going, because this can mean a couple of things to me. So
okay,
let's hear your definition. And
so embedding from this perspective is basically, I have some MAUI code. I have like MAUI controls. I have some maybe XAML, but at least like pages and stuff, or maybe just a few, and I want to shove that into. I also have an Android app that I've written in Kotlin, and that's my app. But I want to bring this MAUI thing that I have into that app without switching everything to MAUI.
Okay.
So that's what this embedding scenario is for customers who might want to sprinkle a little bit of MAUI into their native apps. And basically it gives you a way to kind of say like, okay, here's my page, like give that to me in a platform specific thing, and it'll hand back to like let's start at the view level. It'll hand you back like a UI view, for instance, or something like that, right? If you're
okay.
Yeah. Then you can go put that where you want.
The reason that I'm interested in it though is because there's other things that end up being kind of pseudo native, like that they're kind of out of the box. So if we think about a widget on Apple, I don't think it quite applies. Well, it could. It could.
I don't know if it could, because
widgets you live
are
outside of scope, and memory and.
Well, it's more than that. It's the Swift UI stuff. All the things that are like your entry is Swift UI. Yeah.
Well, but what about notification content extension? That could potentially be.
Is that one UI kit based?
You can do view. You can do a view. You can hand it a view controller and say, "This is what you're displaying. Deal with it."
Yeah.
So
that could be a way,
but it's got to be like rocket speed. Like you don't get dependency injection the same way. Like you're very limited on the content extensions.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I bring this up is because it's not just for the content extension. Because when you go to the Android side of the equation, Android's far less caring.
Yeah.
It now means that I can do that content, that rich widget or content, rich notification. I can do it on both sides of the equation with one set of code.
Yeah.
Potentially. So that's a big one. Now, again, dependency injection gone. You're kind of out of proc. Yeah. But you're still able to write your UI mostly in one spot.
And usually the way you kind of move things around then is some storage in between, right? Like maybe you just dump stuff out to a JSON file and you can load that from your extension or whatever.
You got to be careful. There's still some some catches there.
Yeah.
That
it's not a given that it's easy. So like embedding was technically there already. It's just that it was not really nice to use. There's a few rough edges, a lot of rough edges, I should say. So there's a lot of work, or there has been or is ongoing, a lot of work going into just making that a better experience so that it's easier to use. Because like ultimately the trick with embedding is all of our stuff, like our handlers and things are kind of architected so that they have a MAUI context, which has a window, like all the different scope and everything that comes along with it, right? So you kind of had to like set up your own kind of fake version of some of those things.
Yep.
So there's a lot of ceremony around it. So that's what we're trying to make easier.
So that'll be cool.
Yeah.
This might have, maybe not at the first version, but I think this can start scratching some itches.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting application. And I don't think I think if there was, we already would have done it with other stuff. But like, I don't think there's a way to embed a UI view inside of a Swift UI at all, right? I think like you could do the opposite way, but you can't do.
No, that's why I went to the rich notifications, because there it's still based on a view controller.
Yeah.
As opposed to trying to do stuff with Swift. Which one are we locked into Swift UI? We were talking about it.
Oh, like the widgets, like on the home, the
No, you know what it is? It's not rich notifications. It's the new Apple like live activity notifications.
Oh yeah, that too.
Those are Swift UI, and those I've been trying to figure out how to get involved with, but it's a bit limiting right now. We have to look into some stuff there at some point that we can work with. Lots of Swift UI.
Yeah,
that's coming, right? It's coming.
I mean, maybe, I don't know. That's beyond my scope of what I'm looking at. So
somebody is working on Swift UI in the .NET.
I mean, there's been experiments in the past, like even in the Xamarin days. I think it's like somebody had Swift UI working from C# in some capacity. So like in theory,
Swift interop though. If it gets
Swift interop, yeah. There's
have Swift UI.
There's work going on. I don't think it's Net 9 focused, or like maybe there'll be some experimental stuff out there. I mean, they're doing all the work out in the open, so it's not like I'm giving anything away, but
I'm watching it.
Yeah.
All right,
so
let's get to the next one, because I know the next one's exciting too.
I mean,
what does it mean though?
So CollectionView Handler 2. Oh, I like the sound of that.
2.0.
CollectionView Handler 2 and you. Yeah. So it's
jeez, you're on a roll today, man.
We decided a while ago, and we revisited and decided the same to an extent, that as things progress, like one of the things that we're going to do is create new versions of handlers and kind of deprecate the old eventually and remove them. And that's kind of a clean point for us to do a lot of changes in a space that is very easy to kind of escape hatch from if you need to. So CollectionView, if you've used Maui, probably not a shocker to anyone that it's one of the controls that can run into things, right? It's
Fair.
it's
Yeah.
it's a lot better than it was, but it's a very difficult area, to work in and make work well for all the different scenarios that people use it in. And so
Yeah,
inevitably,
you're trying to solve world peace in it because it
right,
does everything
right,
with the
does
kitchen and the
grids, it
kitchen sink.
does horizontal, it does grouping, it does, all the different things. So yeah, it's built on code that was built a while ago that was using APIs that were built a long time ago too. And so in part
Sometimes you
of
got to tear it down and
yeah,
build again.
you do. And which is kind of like what happened when they built I wasn't on the team at the time when they built CollectionView, when list view was kind of the old thing. Like on Android, they're like, hey, recycler view is a thing now. Like, let's use that. Right. So every once in a while things change enough on the platform level that you kind of do have to go back and revisit and use newer APIs. So that's the change here is that we are using newer APIs for the iOS implementation and Mac Catalyst, therefore, too, of our collection view control. Since iOS 13, there is now a UI collection view compositional layout stuff, which makes a lot of what we were managing on our own in terms of measuring things and figuring all that out just a lot easier to implement and to maintain. And so like I did an experiment a while ago this year trying to like swap in the new APIs just to see what it felt like in our own implementation. And it kind of turns out like, oh, I got to delete a lot of code that was like measuring cell sizes and areas that we were finding the most challenging to maintain while fixing bugs and not breaking other people's scenarios. So a lot of this is kind of done for us with compositional layout stuff. And so yeah, that's what this effectively is. We're adding a new handler version. We're not sure yet if it will be the default in Net 9. But if it's not, you'll be able to opt into it. If it is the default and you use it and you're like, oh, this breaks my application real bad and it was working actually well, you can always go say, you know what, let's use the old handler for now. So that's kind of the big change with that.
Interesting. I will be interested to see how that goes.
And it's not
I'm using a mad mix of different controls right now. If I run into a performance issue,
mm-hmm.
and I'm going, okay, well, the cell's pretty good. I'm going to put this one on CollectionView. I'll swap out real quick.
Yep.
And I mean, that's the luxury we're in to do that, right? Like there's your virtual list view. There's still Sharp Native out there. There's another couple that have popped up on the radar.
Yeah. And that's actually like, I don't know if it's public yet or not. Like I know David had made a sample an app that was just using like all the different collection views and list views that are out there.
Yep.
And just trying them out and trying to like recreate, popular layouts from apps and stuff and just getting a feel for like giving us a good way to kind of like look and compare and see like where do you hit rough areas and stuff, right? So yeah, like you take something like that and you can see like, oh yeah, there are ideally you wouldn't have to go use 3 different things, but
True.
if you need to, it's there. You can do it.
Sometimes you don't need to get everything out of the box. I know a lot of people, especially in the Microsoft, I don't know what you guys are cursed with, but everybody wants it in the box.
Yeah.
To start. It's your curse to bear, I guess.
Well,
because I've never been that way. Like if this thing either doesn't have the feature set, which, that can often be the case anyways.
Yeah.
Or it's causing problems that either A, they're too hard to work around, they take too long, or they're just plain broken. It's easy to swap out. That's the whole point. Like I don't need one suite to solve it all.
Yeah.
And all the control vendors are there, etc. But
yeah,
this is the age we're in now.
Well, and I think part of it is just kind of trying to shift responsibility, right? Like if I have to go out and find something else, well, now that adds more, risk to my work essentially.
Sure. But every time you're taking something external, you're in risk, right? So you should always have an escape hatch everywhere. Everything that you're using That doesn't mean go abstracting everything. For God's sakes, if I see another Bluetooth abstraction around a Bluetooth abstraction, I think I'm going to lose my marbles. Quit doing that. But you certainly want to frame things well enough that this collection view is a problem, or this library is a problem. Out it comes. In goes a new one.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm going to replace it with my own handwritten stuff. Who knows? But it should mostly be easy to swap in components as needed.
Yeah, exactly.
But yes, you're taking every line of code you write is potentially a line of risk.
Yeah.
So just to clear that in the management perspective.
And the collection view, that like the new handler here, I think one of the interesting things was in playing so much in this space myself was that like I went back to see like, okay, well, there's two things. One, it means that we're bumping minimum support to iOS 13 and higher, because these APIs came in iOS 13. We've been watching them for years, just salivating over when we could finally use them and that be okay. And based on, what we've done talking to customers and stuff so far, like seems like, yeah, everybody's pretty comfortable with 13 as the min.
Who uses old iOS anyways?
Well, really? if you look at no, like exactly,
you're supposed to throw them out every 3 years, right?
Yeah. Well, if you look at how, and like Apple's one of the better ones at how long they support devices with newer versions, right? So if you actually look at what the oldest version or the oldest devices that don't get, anything
like
that
iPhone
new.
8.
Oh, it's older than that.
No, I think they just upped it with 18.
So the oldest iPhone that will not be able to meet the 13 or higher, requirement for us is the iPhone 6.
Oh, I'm talking about getting iOS 18 though.
Oh,
so
sure.
In terms of new updates to push you to go forward.
Yeah, they cut off the iPhone 10.
Oh, did they?
Yep.
Okay, it went up a lot higher.
The XR is the now oldest one to get iOS 18.
Well, I mean, it burns my human skin right now running iOS 18.
Yeah, no kidding.
But
so that was like, looking at some of the decisions that we made, and actually, if you had a device that got 13, it also got 15. Like there was no devices that got 13 only or 14 only. Like if you had one, they gave it 15 as well.
Okay. Well,
so we could actually bump to that, but for some reason there is a mix, and maybe there is actually like there's a couple of iPads that maybe are implicated more in the 13 or so that didn't get, if they got 13, they might not have got 15. I don't know, but yeah.
Now this CollectionView handler too, what does it mean for Android? Does it mean much there?
Maybe. We were just actually having the discussion earlier. There's a couple of ways we could do it. We could just increment everything across the board so that like everything is 2, and Android, even though there's no changes, it still is 2 as well. I think for the first preview that we release of it, we're not going to do that. We're only going to make it for iOS. iOS will be the only platform that has a CollectionView handler 2. Just so we're not duplicating code in the repo. We looked at like subclassing things as a way to do it, but that is kind of weird too, because it does change the inheritance hierarchy, especially with CollectionView, which is kind of a weird thing to begin with, and how we have it using handlers. So
you can use an extension method and just say this is for iOS. Yeah. And if it's for Android, we're going back to the other.
And effectively, like on your app builder, there will be something that allows you to say like, no, use the old handler, or yes, I want to opt into the new handler, and we'll either scope that to just iOS, or it'll just be like a method and it's a no op on platforms that don't have it anyway. So
sounds good. I'm waiting to see it.
Yeah, it looks promising. It certainly brings the amount of code we have in the implementation way down, which is nothing but good in terms of like figuring out how to manage it going forward, and fixing bugs with less complexity is always nice too.
So your last item, let's make the whole 5 listeners that use Windows happy.
This one's not a done deal per se. And it's not really a change in Net 9 as much as we're contemplating changing the templates for Net9 to use Windows. So Windows, if you've used Windows, you might have heard the term packaged or unpackaged, right?
Yes.
Or
Yeah, unfortunately.
packaged being MSIX, and packaged was kind of what UWP used and how they kind of sandbox stuff in terms of how you built things and shipped them to the Windows Store and all that, and installed them, even too. So Maui by default has been packaged, and the reason for that mostly has been because the WinApp SDK itself, there's some differences in behavior, even some like API implementation between packaged and unpackaged. So that gap has closed, but it used to be like this API doesn't work at all in unpackaged. Okay. um, we have an API that uses it, that wraps that API. It'd be really nice if it worked in both places. Um, and so for a while, things like we had problems with custom fonts working in unpackaged. We had problems with font icons working in unpackaged. A lot of those things have been sorted out. Um, and so at this point, the gap is much smaller. There's still a few things here and there, but we're thinking, the dev loop is a little bit better, which it's already decent on Windows anyway. Sometimes I just I target Windows with my app, but I don't release it on Windows. I use it for dev loop. It's nice. It's fast. So
I am about to start doing a Windows
ooh,
Maui. Yeah, I know that's shocking, right?
it is.
It is, but it's going to be a web view with Blazor.
Fair.
That's
Fine.
it.
Go for it. Yeah.
And that works.
Yeah.
So that means I just want essentials and I want a web view, and that's it. And the rest can don't want any WinUI besides that web view.
And that was kind of part of it too, right? So like a lot of the APIs that didn't work in unpackaged were in essentials. And just even beyond stuff that didn't work, there's things like when you try and use essentials for like the file system to get like the app data folder or the cache folder, they're just in different conventions between packaged and unpackaged, right? So one classic thing could be, I started building in packaged and I switched over to try deploying unpackaged, and now all the stuff I stored in my app data directory is gone. It's like, well, yeah, they're different places. So there's stuff like that. But yeah, we're thinking about switching that to be the default just because the dev loop is nicer. It's easier to deploy. Like if you want to build an app and have an exe to give someone to run, like you can't do that with packaged. Trying to deploy and give someone like an MSIX is a huge pain because probably you signed it with a self-signed certificate, which means they have to go like install that cert on their machine and do all this like song and dance to even install the thing.
Sounds like iOS.
Yeah, basically. Maybe even worse.
Yeah. And if we're saying it's worse, then it's really bad.
Yeah, it's not fun.
iOS,
I mean,
iOS.
yeah. So that's
Windows.
That's the switch.
Just stop reinventing UI stuff. Just work. That's all I'm asking, man.
It's not that bad these days,
Oh,
you'll find.
you have to say that. I don't.
I mean, I'm saying that from my app perspective. I said, I use it quite a bit to develop. It's fine.
Well, we'll see how it goes. You're the guy that's ultimately going to have to listen to my complaints anyways. And you kind of go, yeah.
I mean, I have
about Windows again, and
my special
that goes in my mute
folder for them back there too. So
yeah, it goes into my mute.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's okay. Great. All right, so that pretty much covers all of the cool stuff that we've got listed for Net9.
I think so.
And you think it's going to ship on time?
Oh yeah,
that's good.
The boat's leaving. Got to be on it.
I got my rant in for the week. Do we have to think of a plugin though, John? Do we have a plugin this week?
Good question.
You did the notes for this episode, man. This is on you.
Plugin.
So we need a good plugin, and I don't want to do it injustice though. But what are we gonna do? Let's skip it for this week.
Yeah, the new plugin. The new package, the new product is .NET 9. It was in the .NET 9 the whole time.
Okay. John's wearing a chicken on his hat today, so I think that that's had an effect on both of us because I'm having a hard time taking him seriously with his chicken looking back at me.
It's a mud hen, actually.
It looks like a chicken to me with a giant T on its head. It's
Yeah.
a chicken. It's you wearing a hat with a chicken with also a hat on its head with a giant T. So it's thrown me off.
It's the Toledo Mud Hens. Actually, I'm going to a Toledo Mud Hens game on Sunday.
Oh, well, don't get muddy.
Well, probably. It's in Toledo, so you never know.
I need drum. Do I have drums on this thing? I have a trombone, but I won't press that because I don't know how loud it is. But
all right.
All right.
On that note, I think that'll do it for today. But if you don't want to hear us try and struggle to think of a package, plugin, or product, let us know if you have one that we haven't talked about, or you know of one. You know, maybe there's some good stuff out there we haven't seen yet. It's always fun to discover new stuff and take a look at it. So let us know. You can let us know right after you go do the 5-star review rating on your podcast, I don't know, directory, Apple Podcast, wherever. So
just on that note, I thought of a tool. If you're a Mac user, go get Warp.
Oh yeah, that's fun.
I told John that the other night, and I think he's loving it. So
now they're gonna not feel like they need to reach out to us at all. So
no, you still have to reach out to us because then you don't have to listen to us babble for 5 minutes going, what should we do?
Yeah, and if we get to the point where we're like flush with 5-star reviews, I'll stop whining about that too. So
there you go.
Yeah,
all good.
All right, GoneMobile.io. We'll see you next time on Gone Mobile.